Joker 2 is a bad movie. I'd even go as far as saying it's a horrible film. But I didn't expect it to flop nearly as hard as it currently is. This is pathetic, the numbers it's putting up in the box office right now. This is the Concorde of movies. The studio stands to lose roughly $150 million based on the estimates right now if the projections keep being followed. It is disastrous. I thought no matter how terrible this film was, it would still do well in the box office because it had such a large fan base that I thought would go see it no matter what, just to give it a chance. Nope, that wasn't the case at all. If you needed to escape from authorities and needed a place to lay low, buy a ticket to Joker 2. No one would ever check that auditorium. No one is going there. Those theaters are more empty than the room Squidward goes to be all alone in the void. It's bad. Also, I make that reference with Squidward a lot. That's just something that's always in my noodle. That's probably still one of my favorite scenes in SpongeBob. But anyway, right now, Joker 2 has opened to a $37.8 million box office domestically, which is actually lower than Morbius. What great company to have right there. It has done worse than Morbius so far. Now, globally, Joker 2 has brought in about $114 million, which isn't the smash success they were expecting it to be. That number sounds very high, but with the amount of money they put into it, it's still not doing well at all. And in the domestic box office, it's horrific. They're starting to realize Joker 2 isn't a tragedy, it's a fucking comedy. Everyone is pointing and laughing at this thing. It super sucks. But not only that, Joker 2 Folie à Deux PU, this is the poop that just keeps on stinking, because not only is its box office performance lackluster, it has the lowest cinema score out of any comic book movie ever, at a D. Now, I'm not going to sit here and blow smoke up your butthole pretending that I know everything there is to know about cinema score. This is actually really like one of the few times I've heard of it, so I'm not the most familiar with it, but it's been around for a while and it is a consistent score that pulls moviegoers after seeing a movie just to kind of gauge reactions, and then they assign a grade to it. And prior to Joker 2, the record holder for lowest cinema score for a comic book movie was Fantastic Four from 2015, which had a C-. That movie is still, to date, one of the most hated comic book movies of all time. And now Joker 2 is below that. That's mind-boggling. And they also put it in another perspective here. Borderlands, which I believe is the worst movie of this year, by far, I think it is significantly worse than Joker 2, actually has a D+, meaning that it has a higher score than Joker 2. And Madam Web, which I believe is one of the worst comic book movies of all time, has a C+, so significantly higher than Joker 2. Initially, I just assumed that all cinema scores would skew on the very low side of things, because when people go see a movie that's bad, like a Madam Web, like a Fantastic Four, like a Joker 2, their initial reaction is obviously going to be anger, like, I wasted money on this is absolute dog shit, thus the cinema scores would always be low. But when I saw Madam Web had a C+, I realized that just wasn't really the case. There are people that go see these objectively dog shit films, and they just have dog shit taste that aligns with it, so they liked it. So Madam Web having a C+, it's not always just going to be the most outraged of people every time. Joker 2 is so universally hated by critics and audience alike that even just gauging moviegoers' experiences, you're getting mostly negative without very many positives. So this movie failed on everything it tried to do. I think one of the main contributing factors for everyone's disgust with the film is how a lot of people went into this not even knowing it was a musical. I knew that going into it because it had been talked about prior, but if you only went in based on the trailers and based on how much you liked the first one, you would be caught completely off guard by this being a fucking musical. The trailers try their best to hide that. There's little hints that there might be some kind of music scene, but there is nothing in the trailers that would have you going into this thinking that you're getting a full-blown fucking Red Alert musical. So a lot of people felt really misled by that, and I imagine that contributed heavily to how much they hated it. Now, I don't agree that Joker 2 Folie à Deux is the worst comic book movie ever. I think that is an absurd claim. There are significantly worse comic book movies, and it is definitely not worse than Borderlands, but I do agree that Joker 2 is the most disappointing movie, most disappointing comic book movie. It is shocking how you'd follow up a movie that was so well regarded, Joker, with this sequel that seemed to really hate the first film. This movie, like, kind of went out on this vendetta to try and undo everything of the first film, and it just sucks. And even if it didn't have that grudge against the first movie and its success, this film on its own two legs is also trash. It's a terrible plot. It's a really messy clusterfuck of a narrative. Like, nothing really works here. The movie ends in the exact same spot that it begins, with pretty much nothing changing and an abrupt death. It is the least satisfying film ever that has nothing redeeming about it, really. Aside from some good performances, and I guess if you really like musicals, there's a couple of songs in there that are just good songs, but even the musicals are lackluster because they don't really tie into the story. It's just unsuccessful with everything that it did, and it did not do much in the first place. I was talking with a buddy of mine about how shit Joker 2 was, and we were just kind of spitballing like what made it so bad and how it even got to that point. And then later he sent me this post from Culture Crave that kind of gives bullet points on how this catastrophe came into existence. So I've heard some of these, but some of them were brand new information. So apparently the idea came to Joaquin Phoenix in a dream. And there's multiple sources that corroborate that little nugget of lunacy. It turns out that it was Phoenix who came up with the idea for the sequel, which came to him in a dream. And he and Phillips brought this idea to former Warner Bros. Chairman Toby Emmerich, according to sources. After one insider was asked who the movie was made for, they responded with two words: for Joaquin. That is so silly. I hear that a lot, actually, though. That's a pretty common cliche where if people are asked about something like, how did this come to be? Some people will default to just making up some pretentious nonsense like, oh, it came to me in a dream, actually. I doubt it. I really doubt that. But let's just assume in this case it's real. Joaquin Phoenix had a dream about Joker 2 being a musical. Just keep that a dream, buddy. Like, that's a stupid idea. That's not even something worthy of taking to anyone. That's embarrassing. And what's even more embarrassing is how up his own ass Todd Phillips is that he thought that that was a great decision, and he thought he knew better than everyone else, so he shunned the rest of the department to do his own thing, because he knew better. He had the billion-dollar blockbuster mega-hit Joker. He can do no wrong. So he ran with this stupid idea that came to Phoenix in a dream. They also apparently tossed around another stupid idea about putting it on Broadway before making it into a film. Though I guess admittedly it would have been better on Broadway than in a movie setting, because at least then they could try and make the musicals work and weave it more into the actual plot. But unfortunately we were cursed with this film. Todd Phillips had free reign with Warner Bros. Wanting him to do his thing, and the film had no test screenings. Because why would you test screen this? Todd Phillips knows what you like. Clearly, he's in your fucking walls. He is in your noodle reading your mind. He's delivering that fire that you've been looking for with Joker sequel. Lady Gaga signed on before the script was finished. That one I don't think is that big of a deal. She is a talented actress, so if she signed on because she was excited for the script even though it wasn't done, I don't think it's that surprising or that big of an issue, but I do imagine she might have some regret with agreeing to do this before seeing the final script, because this has become a joke. Next, the new DC boss, James Gunn, had zero involvement, gave notes, but Todd Phillips didn't use them. Used them for toilet paper, I'm sure. I mean, why would you try and give notes to Todd Phillips? I mean, he's got no blemishes on his resume. He knows how to handle a sequel. What could you possibly have notes on for Joker Folie à Deux? It's a fucking masterpiece, clearly. God, I don't know a whole lot about Todd Phillips other than his previous work, but his attitude for this movie is so yucky. It's so embarrassing just reading about him. The film had a budget of $200 million, which included a $20 million salary for Phoenix, $12 million for Lady Gaga. Not surprising, almost every blockbuster that comes out is in like the $100-200 million plus ballpark. I imagine this film in the marketing budget alone adds an additional $200 million to that figure. Musical aspects were largely downplayed in marketing, with director Todd Phillips at first insisting it wasn't one. I don't remember Todd Phillips trying to shut that down or anything, put the kibosh on it. For as long as I can remember, the film, since its official announcement, had always had that knowledge revealed that there was a lot of musical elements to it. So I went in with the impression that this was going to be a musical, and I imagine a lot of others did as well. But again, if you just watch the trailers, it doesn't really come across that way. So perhaps Todd Phillips made that conscious decision to hide that fact because musicals I mean, especially for fans of the first Joker movie, probably aren't going to be that enticing for this kind of audience. So I imagine that's probably accurate, but I don't recall Todd Phillips trying to downplay it. Christopher Nolan reportedly changed the ending of the first movie because it ended with Phoenix's Joker carving a smile. There was no resistance for the sequel with Nolan leaving Warner Bros. That was fascinating to me. So apparently, Todd Phillips had actually wanted in the first film him to cut the smile into his face. Christopher Nolan was apparently still with Warner Bros. At the time, so he had say-so here and said, "You're a fucking idiot." No, he shut that shit down real quick. But now that Nolan left Warner Bros., Todd Phillips was left to his own devices again and went hog wild, so as all of you know by now, the Joker 2 ends with a completely random psychopath who shanks Joaquin Phoenix's Joker in the hallway where the movie begins, because nothing in this film fucking changes and nothing actually matters in the movie. This random guy abruptly kills him, and then in the background cuts a smile into his face. Just Todd Phillips paying a little disrespect to Nolan here, and the legacy that Nolan built with that Joker. It's such an insulting thing to conclude here, because it's not well done, it comes out of nowhere, and this whole film is garbage in the first place, so it's just an even bigger waste of time. I understand why Nolan would absolutely not want Phillips to do that. It's also just highly unnecessary and doesn't actually tie into anything, so it's super dumb, but since Nolan wasn't at Warner Bros. At the time, Todd Phillips unfortunately got to do it, and we're all worse off for it. This next one had me giggling. Todd Phillips was secluded on a ranch during the opening weekend. I think he was bracing for the storm. I think he knew that this was not going to be received well. It was already not being highly reviewed from the people that had already seen it. So I imagine he had the inkling that, man, maybe he missed the mark. Or I could be totally wrong. Perhaps this is Todd Phillips just under the impression that his high art speaks for itself, and he wants people to come up with their own conclusions based on the nothing burger he served them. So he isolated himself from the rest of society to give us this chance. But more than likely, he just went to the ranch to just go ahead and tune everything out and count all the money Warner Bros. Dumped on his fucking front porch for this absolutely trash sequel. Film was panned by fans and critics. It currently has a 33% from Rotten Tomatoes critics and a 31% audience score. It has the cinema score of D, lowest ever for a comic book film. Domestically opened with $37.8 million, which is lower than comic book films like Morbius and the Marvels, and it needs $450 million globally to break even, which may lose the studio over $150 million, and Warner Bros. Discovery is already in $40 billion of debt. And god damn it, they earned every penny of that debt. Warner Bros. Keeps making the stupidest decisions. I am always surprised to see what new batshit insane idea fucking Zaslav comes up with. Every move he makes, he's like the opposite of King Midas, where King Midas would turn things to gold. Zaslav comes around with a cheese touch. He turns everything to actual poop. He is just, I don't know how he even got this position. He is bad at his job. So Warner Bros. Is deep in debt. This is not helping at all. And I just had to talk about it again. You know, Joker 2 is all about musicals and dancing, so you know what, I'll give you one of these. I'll dance on the grave of Joker 2. What a fucking disaster. And it earned it too, man. The movie is bad, the decision making was bad with it, and Warner Bros. Really needs to figure it out, because it is getting embarrassing for that whole company. That's about it. See ya.